First of all and foremost, I am happy that we've been making a lot of progress on this issue over the past few months. Previously, law enforcement and our opponents would always completely deny any medical benefit to marijuana, and recently we've seen a very happy evolution in their views. Now they're saying they're out to protect the legitimate patients. They're saying that they do recognize the medical benefits of marijuana, so I guess you can teach an old cop new tricks, and we're happy about that. The other issue that I need to point out here as an attorney, and I've represented probably well over 100 medical marijuana patients and caregivers in criminal courts. I'm pretty familiar with the Constitution. I assume all the legislatures have a copy of it. Article 18, Section 14, Subsection 8 is quite clear that the legislature has until April 30th, 2001 to enact any implementing legislation on this term. Obviously, we're well past April 30th, 2001. I think any implementing legislation adopted after that date probably will expose the state to a costly lawsuit. That's a problem. If somebody doesn't agree with this portion of the Constitution or believes that it's unworkable or unwise, the remedy for disagreement of that portion of the Constitution is not to just go ahead and pass legislation. The remedy is to approach the voters of the state of Colorado and get that portion of the Colorado Constitution changed. So that would affect any implementing legislation brought up on this subject on medical marijuana in Article 18, Section 14. It is possible, I think, for the state to avoid a lawsuit, and I've been involved with every single civil lawsuit brought in the state of Colorado that has to do with medical marijuana. The way to avoid that is to consider some of the suggested amendments that we have propounded to the committee. I'm going to take a very brief time to highlight some of the real problems with this bill, and I'm happy to answer your questions. I've got 9 years of experience litigating in this area. I've been in and out of courts all over the state of Colorado. I've dealt with DAs, police officers, attorney generals, and everybody in between. I'm happy to answer your questions. First, on page 3, lines 12 through 16, we're very concerned about the requirement that a physician have an unrestricted license, because there are many physicians who are practicing in their specialty with restricted licenses in Colorado. You can do heart surgery with a restricted license under some circumstances. If you can do that, you should probably be able to recommend or advise a patient about medical marijuana. Even more concerning is the veto that the bill gives to the United States Drug Enforcement Administration to meddle in our state affairs and hamper our state constitution. That's got to come out. The DEA has demonstrated over and over and over again its hostility to medical marijuana. They utterly deny it. They've done everything they can to undermine it in our state. The DEA is of the opinion that any physician who advises a patient about medical marijuana is, in and of himself or herself, violating the Federal Controlled Substances Act, and the DEA has threatened to revoke people's DEA certification for recommending marijuana. It's a catch-22. Any physician who recommends it could lose his DEA certification, and that would render the program completely unworkable, because without the physicians, the program breaks down. So we're hoping that that can be addressed. Page 4, very simply, lines 8 through 14, eliminates the confidential nature of the registry. This is a confidential registry. The Colorado Constitution says it's confidential under no uncertain terms. That can't be amended without a vote of the people of Colorado. So it's got to remain confidential. It cannot be used as a device for witch hunts against doctors who courageously recommend medical marijuana. That's wrong. We shouldn't do that. These doctors are already persecuted enough. They're all over the newspaper. They're being criticized and persecuted by law enforcement all the time, and so we should not use this as a device to further persecute them. Page 6, lines 18 through 17. Physicians, this would prohibit physicians from providing even medical advice to caregivers at all and getting paid for it. That's a problem. A lot of caregivers want to become patients themselves. They should not be restricted from doing that. We don't disagree with the theory that doctors should not be financially interested in whether or not to issue a physician advice. Therefore, if that amendment could be just tweaked a little bit, we certainly don't disagree that a doctor should not be in an ownership position of a dispensary. I've always advised my clients who are physicians, you cannot own a dispensary under existing law, because existing law says specifically a caregiver cannot be a physician. That's already in the law. this would only qualify that, but it certainly needs to be fine-tuned to allow a doctor to occupy the same place as a dispensary if he or she pays rent to that dispensary or wellness center, and that is only comparable to every other hospital really in the world. Every time I've received a prescription for serious narcotics for back pain or some sports injury or something like that, the doctor gives me the prescription, I go to the pharmacy in the hospital under the same roof, in the same location, pay money to the exact same thing. I use Kaiser myself, so I pay the doctor and I pay the pharmacy, I write the check to the same thing. So what we would do here is hold medical marijuana to a higher standard that no other physician specialty needs to meet. Page 7, lines 6 through 18 and 21 through 23, and also page 8, that entire subsection should be deleted to the extent that it allows the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment any oversight authority whatsoever on physicians. The Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, and I'm well acquainted with that agency, having sued it, is simply just not set up to deal with physicians and oversee physicians. We already have a board in Colorado that does that, the Board of Medical Examiners. It's just an additional layer of government that is unnecessary, and it would burden the CDPHE as well. CDPHE takes 4 months to issue a registry card. 4 months, they're overburdened. They can't deal with the burden like this bill gives them. Page 8, finally, lines 18 through 25. This is a big one for us. Probationers, people who are convicted of crimes, whether they're marijuana related or not, absolutely should not lose their constitutional right to deal with their debilitating medical conditions. The irony in this is the first part of the bill sets up definitions as to what a bona fide doctor-patient relationship is, and then this part of the bill completely undermines those. I understand there may be an amendment offered to this. We strongly support that, but in undermining the bill's earlier position on bona fide doctor-patient relations, it said that a court-appointed physician then gets to decide whether a probationer or somebody convicted of a crime can use medical marijuana. That court-appointed physician probably doesn't have a bona fide physician-patient relationship with that patient. Who pays that court-appointed doctor? The taxpayers. This is unnecessary. We've also got a case in front of the Colorado Court of Appeals, People versus Durkin, which I'm litigating right now, and that involves the issue of whether a probation can be prohibited by a court from using medical marijuana. And in that case, the District Court of Routt County, Colorado, said, I'm sorry, Mr. Durkin, you're on probation, you can't use your medical marijuana, you're just going to have to suffer for the next 2 years. That's what the court said to this man on the record. We have that record, we're appealing that to the Colorado Court of Appeals. It is wrong for a judge sitting on a bench wearing a robe to practice medicine. It was wrong for that judge to substitute her judgment for the judgment of the doctor that recommended medical marijuana. That's wrong. We're settling this issue in the Court of Appeals. We should let that process play out. We should not restrict people who happen to have a criminal conviction from their medicine. It just doesn't make any sense. So thank you very much for your indulgence. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Corey. There's a lot to digest here in all of these amendments, and so some of us